Hello, my name is Noah Erwin. I'm on the policy team at Pasa Sustainable Agriculture. And today I'm going to talk about a policy project that we worked on to show the importance of building policy that focuses on communities and those with lived experiences. So, like most policy projects, we started with a problem. The problem being that urban farmers, similar to their rural counterparts, need stable long-term land access and security. Also, similar to their rural counterparts, they need access to government services and government programs to support their work. They also need protections from nuisance complaints from non-farming folks expecting peace and quiet at all times when that's not possible in most agricultural operations. So that's where we started. Where we are now is we have a policy proposal, a package of legislation that would attack those problems from different angles. So one component is to update and standardize the definition of a farm across programs and policies in Pennsylvania. The next is to make changes to our state farmland preservation programs to make them more accessible for all farmers. Also making changes to how land banks can function to make them better partners with farmers. And also providing some best practices when it comes to zoning to make agricultural as easy as possible in our cities. So on a project like this, it really takes a village. As you can see from the more than 32 names listed here, this took a lot of conversations with a lot of different people to get to where we are. And as you see from the timeline at the top, this was an over 15-month process to take feedback from folks, incorporate it, ask for more feedback, and so forth. So starting at point zero, farmers have been trying to farm for forever, and it's tough to farm. It's actually really difficult to farm. It's actually super hard to farm, no matter where you are. But most people, most farmers list a couple similar themes when it comes to barriers to farming, basic barriers. One is that neighbors who aren't farming, aren't in agriculture, don't understand what it looks like to farm and what it sounds like to farm, and they will often file nuisance complaints. Also, having basic long-term land access and land security is necessary to plan and grow your farm operation. But how do folks do that when they don't have that long-term access to land ownership especially? And then when you layer systemic racism and the legacy of redlining on top of those obstacles that all farmers, but especially urban farmers, face, in our cities, it's an absolute zoning nightmare. And that some plots you can farm tomorrow. You could start your farm operation with no problem. And the next plot over might be zoned industrial, and you might need an exemption. You might need special permission. And it's a whole process just to grow your own food for your community. So maybe Pennsylvania as a state should do something to incentivize and encourage more folks to farm in cities and make it easier for them to do that. So that's where we'll pick up with this policy project starting in the summer of 2024, before I was actually at Pasa. But my colleague, Lindsay Shapiro, was working with State Representative Chris Rabb. He had legislation to create urban ag zones. And in these zones, there would be basic protections for farmers when they enter leases with lease agreements with municipalities, so that there was some just basic protection for farmers. The legislation would also allow utilities to offer farmers discounted rates for the services to make it a little bit easier to farm financially. Some of the feedback we got from that, from a hearing and then the meeting, Russ Thorson from Pasa said that this legislation doesn't do anything about groundhogs. And if you farmed anywhere, but especially in urban spaces, groundhogs are some of the biggest problems that folks deal with. We also heard from local government experts that it's really hard to reassess property taxes, even for specific plots, just for agricultural plots. And that was going to be a key incentive piece of the legislation, was reassessing and lowering the property taxes for these agricultural sites. And Don Mattei, who was at Pasa at the time, raised a great question of, does this allow growers to sell on site? That's consistently been one of the biggest points of feedback from farmers in our network, is that they need to be able to sell their produce from their farm. So the conclusion of this was that, all right, this is a great concept. There's a lot of details missing, and implementation is so important when it comes to this type of policy that we need to figure those out. So the next month, we held a webinar with Representative Chris Rabb to iron out some of those details and to get more feedback about the legislation. San Sankofa, who's on the PASA team, asked, how do we enforce these standards? When are we asking each individual farmer to tell each individual city that there are standards in place when they enter into lease agreements? That sounds exhausting. We also learned that this really feels like a carrot approach compared to a stick. And so the conclusion from the webinar and the preceding conversations was that, all right, there's actually a lot of details that are missing, and we need to sort of probably prioritize a few of the points in the legislation and make sure that we iron out those details and sort of narrow the focus. So in the fall of 2024, the policy team had internal conversations with our outreach staff and took a step back and asked, what is most important to the farmers you work with? And the feedback we got most urgently was that farmers, especially in Philadelphia, need FSA farm numbers. At the time, there was terrific government funding available for farmers of all size, but you needed a farm number. To get a farm number, you need documentation showing, a lease or a land ownership. And most folks in Philly didn't have either of those, even though they've been farming for years, sometimes decades. We also heard that land banks, whether in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh, land authorities, municipal land authorities, often didn't play nice when it comes to working with farmers. And then if folks could wave their magic wand and make one change across the board, it would be to allow agricultural as of right use in all zoning parcels, which would mean that you wouldn't need permission to farm in any part of the city. It would just be an allowed activity anywhere. So taking from that feedback, we thought about, all right, what if we had the city of Philadelphia issue an MOU to all farmers to say that you can farm, you're allowed to farm, and that piece of paper would serve as what's needed to get a farm number. Okay, if the Pennsylvania land banks aren't playing nice, let's look elsewhere to see other land banks that are playing nice and to get some other urban ag best practices so that we can make these priorities a reality. So then in January of 2025, policy team had conversations with folks from the National Sustainable Ag Coalition. NSAC is an entity made up of 150 or 200 organizations across the country, similar to PASA, but doing work in their own state, or their own geography, with their own focus. It's really a wealth of knowledge when it comes to ag policy. So remember, we're looking for land bank and other urban ag best practices and trying to flesh out what an MOU might look like. So talking to folks, turns out that finding land banks that are doing good work is really hard. The way they're set up and the way they're incentivized often puts them in close collaboration with big developers and not with farmers. We also heard that an MOU that we proposed would be a massive liability for the city of Philadelphia, and because of that, it probably wouldn't be a path worth pursuing. We also talked to folks in Louisiana who had an urban ag zone program, exactly like the one that we had proposed. And after 2 years, the program actually closed and sunsetted because 0 people participated. It was a carrot approach, and it just didn't incentivize folks enough to act, and so the program ended. So after those conversations, realized, all right, we probably need to take a stick approach as opposed to a carrot when it comes to this. And also, how can we avoid reinventing the wheel by looking at what's already on the books in Pennsylvania to help farmers? So then in the spring of 2025, we held some meetings with some more external partners here in Pennsylvania and followed that up with some research to think about how we take a stick approach and to look at the programs and protections that are already on the books in Pennsylvania that would help farmers. So what we heard and what we learned was that we need to give land banks direction. We need to lay out specific points that they need to do in order to be good partners with farmers. We also looked at expanding Pennsylvania's right to farm law. Currently, that allows, if you're a farmer and you own your land and you have at least 10 acres on your farm, it makes it difficult for neighbors to file nuisance complaints for sort of general basic farm operations. They said, what if we expanded that to our smaller urban farmers? Turns out in other states, when this is a similar path has been pursued, industrial large-scale operations sort of swoop in and end up watering down really important environmental protections that lead to water quality issues and air quality issues. So going down that path is a little bit too risky. We also learned how Pennsylvania is a leader when it comes to farmland preservation. But the way those programs are set up make it very difficult for small or urban farms to be protected. And if we're asking our communities and our cities to grow their own food and provide for themselves, we need to give them the resources and tools to do that. And one of the best ways to do that for farming is to preserve the land so it's not developed. So taking from those conversations and the research, we need to really strike a balance when it comes to direction for land banks. We need to give them direction. We also can't get too bogged down in the details like we did with the previous proposal. We also found that there are a ton of other programs and protections beyond just the right to farm law that would be really helpful for urban farmers. The only switch we need to make is to make the definition of a farm in those programs more inclusive so that it's all farmers and not just farmers of a certain size. So then fast forward to November of 2025, and we have our proposal in its current state. As a reminder, that's the first part is to update and standardize the definition of farm across programs and protections in Pennsylvania, making changes to the farmland preservation programs so that urban farms and small farms rank higher in those programs, giving land banks specific directions on how to be good partners with farmers and requiring that as opposed to making it optional. And then finally, since the state can't do a lot to tell cities how to change their zoning practices, developing best practices so that it make it easier for cities to adopt those pro-agricultural ordinances that we all want to see. And so as the proposal was being introduced, Representative Rabb, who we're working with on the legislation, said, all right, let's put out the proposal, but let's wait to push for this until I get some more support from my colleagues to really sort of broaden the coalition. And so based on their input and their feedback, I'm guessing that the proposals will change and will take a different shape, which really just goes to show how policy changes from step to step. And you really don't know where the end result's going to be. But the more folks you include and as you broaden your coalition, the better it becomes. So thanks for listening today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for your time.